Welcome to Book Two of the Republic. In Book Two, we get all sorts of interesting and important ideas. Here is the first mention of the Callipolis. This is Plato's ideal city. Callipolis, literally translated as the luxurious city, and we'll find out why he wants to use an idealized city as opposed to just talking about some generic city when he sets up his city soul analogy, which begins in book two. It doesn't end in book two, but it begins in book two. But in this brief video, we're just going to talk about the story in the first 3 pages of Book Two of the Republic. So we're starting here with the Stephanus numbers at 357. And the conversation is between Socrates and Glaucon. And Glaucon is saying, hey, remember what Thrasymachus was saying there at the end of Book One? Well, you haven't really convinced us yet. You haven't really convinced us yet that Thrasymachus is wrong, that it's not better to be unjust and to get away with it if we could do that. So here's what Socrates does first is he says, well, look, there are 3 kinds of good. There is intrinsic good, things that are good in and of themselves. Joy would be an intrinsic good. Love, this is intrinsically good. It's good just in and of itself. We would choose it for its own sake. There are things that are instrumentally good. Money is instrumentally good. It's not valuable for its own sake, but it's valuable for what it can buy you. It's valuable for what it can get you. Going to the dentist is instrumentally good. That's something I did recently. I would not choose it for its own sake, but I do it for its consequences. It is good, not for its own sake, but instrumentally for the consequences that it produces. And then there's a third kind of good, the highest form of good. That is something that is both intrinsically and instrumentally good. Some things are good in and of themselves and good for their consequences. Maybe an example would be a sport, doing a sport that you really enjoy that is also really healthy for you and good, good for you. If you love playing pickup basketball and it's also really a great exercise, that would be intrinsically good as well as instrumentally good. Well, Glaucon is going to say, well, now look, most people are going to say that justice is the second kind of good, merely an instrumental good, good for its consequences only. Yes, it's necessary to have the reputation of justice because nobody's going to do business with you. Nobody's going to think you're honest or have anything to do with you if they don't think you're just. But really, it's not good in its own self and its own sake, for its own sake. It'd just be a lot better if we could be unjust and get away with it. What would be best is if I could, steal from you and do whatever I want to you, and then you couldn't steal from me or do anything you wanted from me. That's Glaucon's position, or at least he's sort of playing devil's advocate. He's saying, convince us, Socrates, that's not right. And Socrates is saying, no, no, no. Now, justice is the highest form of good. It's intrinsically good and instrumentally good. Well, Glaucon is still unconvinced, and so Glaucon tells this story. And for those of you who like the Lord of the Rings, This story is going to sound very familiar. This story was already old when Plato told it 400 years before the birth of Jesus. So, Gyges is this shepherd, and he is tending his flock there. And one day he sees this chasm, this big hole in the earth. And in this chasm, he finds these skeletons, these large skeletons. In fact, there's a skeleton of a man on top of the skeleton of a horse. And on the skeleton of the man on the finger, there's a gold ring. And he takes the ring off of his hand. He puts it on his own finger. He takes it for himself there. And so later he's at a meeting of the town, and he's got the ring on his finger, and he's sort of playing with it there. And he notices that when he turns the setting of the ring a certain way, he becomes invisible. He turns it the other way, he becomes visible again. Well, before this, Gyges was just a normal, decent fellow. But now, armed with this superpower, he is corrupt, and he becomes dishonest. He starts to steal and take advantage of others. Eventually, he seduces the queen and kills the king and takes over the kingdom. And Glaucon's point is that if we could get away with it, we would all do that. But Socrates disagrees. Socrates thinks that this is not a path to happiness. And he's going to spend most of the rest of the Republic convincing us of his argument for justice. He's going to come up with he's going to give his definition of justice somewhere in the middle of book 4. But throughout the rest of the Republic, there are over and over and over again still arguments for why this is true and why Thrasymachus is wrong. So the main argument of the whole book of the Republic is, what is justice? And so this very question of what is justice, and is justice preferable to injustice, is the central question. And so I'm going to leave you here. And we will be back in the next video to talk about the city-soul analogy. And that's going to lead to Plato's definition of justice.